Passionate, outspoken, insightful. Ariva Martin is an award-winning civil rights attorney, best-selling author, legal commentator, and America's advocate. Live from Los Angeles, this is The Special Report.
Good morning and welcome to our viewers in the U.S. and around the world. To kick off this morning's broadcast, do me a favor. Please share the show with your online friends or start a viewing party. And remember to post a comment or question. Your voice matters, and I want to hear from you. It's Hot Topics Friday, and I have two of my favorite commentators and hosts joining me this morning to tackle the latest in entertainment, politics, and breaking news. These are the topics that are trending on social media and that millions and millions of people are talking about. So joining me this morning are Jawn Murray and Tara Setmeyer. Jawn is a Democratic commentator and pop culture expert, and Tara is a Republican political analyst and host of the podcast, Honestly Speaking with Tara Setmeyer. Thank you so much, Jawn and Tara, for joining me this morning.
No, my pleasure, my pleasure.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Oh, absolutely. There is so much happening in the news. I feel like every time I turn on the news, you're following one story, and just as you dig deep into that story, there's another story. But today, I don't think there's a bigger story than the VP sweeps. We are all on pins and needles waiting for Biden to make his announcement of his running mate. And I kind of feel like it's an episode of The Bachelor. He told us months ago that it would be a female, so we already know that. But since that announcement, there's been wild speculation, op-eds, endorsements of various candidates, photographs of Biden's handwritten notes, leaks from the vetting committee, and even a retracted article from Politico announcing that my good friend, Senator Kamala Harris, had been selected as the VP. So, Jawn, I know you've been working on this. You're on the ground. So tell us, who's in and who's out?
Well, listen, pop culture is my thing, and I'm a culture critic. But, Tara knows, I love politics. So while I happen to be a Democrat, I wouldn't call myself a Democratic commentator. But I do have a definitive opinion about this VP thing. As much as I would like to have a top one, I have a top two. So I like, first and foremost, Val Demings. Val Demings, the congresswoman who's the former police chief of Orlando. I think she's exceptionally strong. I think as a VP pick, she could go into the White House with a platform of police reform. She's a Delta, so all those Greek organization people would get behind her. And I think for a certain segment of African Americans, the idea that she's married to a black man would be very attractive, seeing that this woman would be going back into the White House with a black husband. It'd give us like the ode to Obama years. And, her husband is the first black mayor of Orlando. But as much as I like Val Demings, and I think she's really strong, she has this regular woman realness about her. I also really like Susan Rice. I think Susan Rice has the experience to be able to do the top job if necessary. And Susan is so good that even if she doesn't become the VP pick, with all her foreign experience and just her knowing how the job works, that she could go into any other post in the cabinet as well. So if Susan doesn't become VP, we know she's going to do something with the Biden administration, because I'm already believing that he's going to be our next president of the United States.
Well, we know that list of women is just super impressive. He really couldn't go wrong picking anyone on that list when you look at their credentials, their experience. But Tara, I've got to say, I was a little surprised by John's choices, because my Senator Kamala Harris, was not number 1 or 2 on his list. So I don't know if that was a little California shade or what, Jawn, but you tell me, Tara, who's on your list for 1 and 2?
Well, it depends on whether it's my preference versus who I think. For me, as a conservative, obviously, I have differences on certain things with certain folks that make it difficult for me to be as invested in this as some others. But I happen to agree with John's assessment on who the top 2 probably are, and with Kamala Harris being the front runner for the most part for most people, just because of her position as a senator, her experience already running for president. So she's gone through already a vetting process to some degree. That's important, because when you run for president, it's a whole different ballgame. It's different than any other office. the type of scrutiny that you come under is unlike anything you've ever experienced, which is where I give Kamala the edge over Susan Rice a little bit, in that Susan Rice just does not have the experience campaigning. And this is going to be a guerrilla warfare fight here. So I think that Susan Rice also is somewhat problematic because of her, yes, she's got foreign policy experience, but Republicans are going to make a big deal out of Benghazi and out of President Obama's foreign policy areas of weakness that they deem. That could come up again. And just the fact that she hasn't really been through the ringer of campaigning at that level, this is a hell of a way to get your feet wet, you know, in a presidential election, especially like this one, on one we're never going to see before. So she'll probably more likely be a Secretary of State type of candidate versus vice president. But I think that the fact that she's come up in this is very interesting. And I happen to agree with Val Demings being, out of everyone that I've seen on the list, she is by far my favorite at this point. She won me over. I was in favor more of Gretchen Whitmer earlier on in the process, but as things have progressed and with the social justice movement, the discussions now nationally about police, Val Demings is a badass. Do you know how hard it has to be a female, Black female, law enforcement officer, chief of police of a major police department? That alone tells me that she's got the strength to be a part of this race and to be vice president. And she's an all-American story. Fantastic story.
I'm going to go to California again on you, Tara. So you talk about someone who's been on the battle for police reform and who, you know, could rise to this moment, you know, where we're looking at protests and we're trying to, you know, we're grappling with the issue of police reform. It's Congresswoman Karen Bass. So she is chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. She was on the grounds after the Rodney King beating in Los Angeles. She led, demonstrators, protesters. She started a nonprofit organization that, you know, has become one of the premier social justice organizations in Los Angeles. And she's the author of that, 2020 policing reform bill. So in many ways, you know, you can check a lot of boxes with Congresswoman Karen Bass, and she is loved by Nancy Pelosi. She's loved by Senator Jim Clyburn. So I think California is looking pretty good here. I think we got a 1 and a 2 coming out of California.
I don't know. Florida's a bit more important as far as electoral votes are concerned. Not to throw any shade on my fellow folks out there in California, but that part of the country is in play. Florida, Georgia, which is an area that the Republicans never thought that they'd have to spend money on, which they're doing. And the difference too is that because Val Demings was an actual law enforcement officer not that long ago, she does, to John's point, have an automatic platform coming in as vice president, a national effort that she could rally around, that she has direct credibility in, that could help heal that divide that's going on right now, because she has credibility on both sides. Kamala Harris, coming from a prosecutorial side of it, back to California, makes it a little more problematic for her. And I know that the progressive side of the aisle there for Democrats had some issues with her and her record, which could come back to haunt them. And Democrats don't need anything else to suppress the vote. We've got enough problems already in that area. So that's another reason why I think Kamala may be a bit problematic.
Well, you just mentioned something really important, Tyra, and that's the progressives. We know the progressives are a big part of the Democratic base. So, John, one name that hasn't come up from, this conversation is Elizabeth Warren. So she went, she got delegates in the primary. She has a huge base. And, the progressives coming out of California, Sanders delegates wrote a letter to the Biden team saying, look, it's got to be Warren, Bass, or Barbara Lee. So Barbara Lee wasn't, maybe even Nina Turner was on their list, but saying we needed a progressive to be selected. So are we, missing something when we're not talking about Elizabeth Warren?
Well, two things here. One, I do want to agree with you. Karen Bass, I've been calling her a sleeper assassin throughout this process. Like, I'm not ruling her out because she brings a lot to the table. While she doesn't have the public persona of a lot of these other political leaders, she is effective at what she can do. And I think she's certainly somebody who's still in that top 4 of ones to watch. But As far as the progressives are concerned, Elizabeth Warren's Senate seat is too valuable for the Senate to lose. There's a great chance that the Senate could turn blue come November, and giving up her seat in Massachusetts, the governor there would probably set a Republican in her seat immediately, and it's too valuable of a seat to lose up. So while she's a woman who Tara and I have had some private arguments about her policies, because there's a lot about Elizabeth Warren that I find attractive policy-wise, I believe that she is suited for the Senate, and even though she may join the administration at some point, they've got to make sure they can't lose her Senate seat.
Well, a last question on the VP pick, and I'm going to ask you, Tara, because you are a Republican, and we know you work with the Lincoln Project, and Biden has been attracting, independents as well as those conservatives who are never Trumpsters. Can we expect to see a backlash from Republicans if the VP pick is an African-American woman? As much as we're all excited about having the first Black woman on the ticket as VP, I do worry about those suburban white women in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, those swing states that we need, to pick up from an electoral college standpoint. How are they going to receive a Black woman as VP candidate?
I think it depends on the Black woman. And I'm concerned about that, even with, an interesting point that was made to me by a fellow Never Trump Republican, who I will not name, about how white women could possibly react to Kamala Harris because of, how she's good looking and she has a certain way about her, and how white women may not like that. She's also married to a white husband. There's all kinds of interesting cultural dynamics there that I hadn't really thought of that could come into play when it comes to white women and Kamala Harris, and why there seems to be a bit of a disconnect there. I don't see that happening with a Val Demings, for example, because of the respect that she commands immediately for being a former police chief. That is, if crime and law and order is going to be the tactic, and fear is going to be the tactic from the Trump administration, is what we're seeing so far. I think Val Demings inoculates that in a lot of ways, because she can stand up and say, listen, you think I'm going to let this go down, this kind of a chaos go down? I was a police chief. And she can, wear that with a badge of valor, and inoculate that fear mongering from the Trump campaign and the fear of Black crime. Val Demings, she right away inoculates that. So I just think it depends on who it is. I think Elizabeth Warren, John and I have argued about this because I don't agree with her economic policies. And I can tell you right now that there would be some of the emotion that I saw from people, the visceral reaction on middle of the road Republicans to Elizabeth Warren was surprising to me, but not unexpected. They would be really, really, really upset if Elizabeth Warren were the vice president, because then the fear of the more progressive socialist moniker that the Trump administration tries to put on Biden would be up for grabs, and I could see the campaign ads now. So I don't think it's going to be Elizabeth Warren for that reason. They would turn off the people in the middle, Republicans who don't like Trump, and Biden's not Hillary, so they feel a little bit more comfortable going with Biden. But Elizabeth Warren, I think, would poison that well.
Well, we're going to move on to our next topic, because you mentioned law and order, and we've been seeing these horrible images played out in Portland with these federal troops that have been on the ground. But also we're starting to see these messages emerge about whether the Black Lives Matter movement is being co-opted by some of these white protesters. And in fact, the Portland NAACP president criticized the mostly white activists, saying the images of them, from the leaf blower dads to the wall of moms to the naked Athena, have dominated the news coverage, taking away from the bigger issues of systemic racism against Black communities. He wrote an op-ed piece actually calling them a white spectacle. So, John, are the white protesters, particularly those in Portland, co-opting the message of Black Lives Matter?
Listen, Riva, I believe in allies and allyship. When you look at the history of civil rights in this country, when you look at the history of the Underground Railroad, if you go to any Black History Museum in this country, for every 100, 200 Black people you see on the wall who are arrested during a voting march protest or something like that, or anybody that you saw that was arrested during the Underground Railroad movement, we know that there were white people who aided us along the way. So we need allyship. But what we don't need is some of the things that we have seen during these more recent Black Lives Matter protests, which is there are people trying to co-opt the movement. You know, we've had the people outside of the culture, outside of the race coming in and doing some of the rioting and some of the looting. We don't need that. We also don't need what happened with this particular woman in Portland who sat in the middle of the street naked with her legs open. Like, this isn't a basic instinct rally. This is a Black Lives Matter rally. And so I know that she's a sex worker and she was trying to make her own statement, but you need to show up clothed and be in line with what we are fighting for. Be an ally, but don't be a distraction in this moment.
What do you think, Tara? You know, some people are saying they don't know what to do when they try to protest, when they go out and say they're standing with Black Lives Matter, they get attacked for, you know, making statements. And others say if they don't say anything, you know, it was trending on social that your silence is violence. So what are these white allies to do? Because it seems like they're getting conflicting messages.
I mean, I just think this is common sense. You know, Jawn is right about that. I mean, if it's a Black Lives Matter movement, I'm not sure what someone spreading their legs in the middle of the street has to do with Black Lives Matter. You know, people are always going to take advantage of the opportunity when they have their own agendas to get attention. And if the attention you're drawing to yourself is not about the conversation of Black Lives Matter, then obviously you're not being an ally. I just don't think that it's really that difficult. It's common sense. Jen Palmieri wrote a really excellent article in Vanity Fair a couple of weeks ago about this a bit, and which I found interesting because she was on the Hillary campaign. She's a big Democratic operative, and she was saying to white women that, listen, yes, we've been allies in areas before, to John's point, but we also need to recognize some of the uglier past where we have not been. And she goes all the way back to the suffrage movement and the rejection of Black women there to some degree. Also, you know, white women against the 15th Amendment at the time, and how Frederick Douglass had to come in and kind of check them and say, wait, hold on here. You know, this is equal rights for all of us, and how dare you guys? You know, we're supporting women's rights to vote and Black people of color's rights to vote, and, you know, Black men and women. And she goes through those examples of where we need to just sometimes stand back. And for white women, they need to stand back and listen more and see and be smart about where you're being an ally, and not just use the aid and comfort of the white patriarchy, which has happened in the past, as an excuse to use your own, co-opt what's going on at the time for your own agenda. I thought it was an excellent way of putting this for white women who want to be allies to kind of look at where they have been complicit and where they can be helpful. And I just think that it's common sense. If it takes away from what the actual issue is, then you're not being an ally.
Well, and you mentioned a good point, and we've been talking a lot about allies, and I want to just double back to the conversation we were having about the VP, because what we're seeing in this race for president is that we are seeing, you know, these strange bedfellows with independents, with conservatives, who, you know, and it's making, quite frankly, John, some Democrats nervous to see so many Republicans, you know, doing ads like the Lincoln Project, speaking up in favor of Biden. Is making Democrats think, wait a minute, how are we going to have a progressive platform if we now are having to, you know, kowtow to, or to, you know, make comfortable Republicans or conservatives who just decided that they hate Trump? So isn't this kind of the same issue? Like, you know, who are our allies, and what do we have to do to make those allies feel comfortable?
Ariva, I'm not nervous at all. I'm over here singing like Adele. Hello from the other side. Come on, come on. Tara will tell you, for the last 3.5 years, you know, I have some amazing Black conservative friends, and I like them because they don't like Trump. So as long as you don't align up with Trumpism, you and I can coexist. So Tara and I have very profound, very prolific, very intellectual debates on politics and policies, and certain things we are on the opposite side of the aisle with. But we enjoy the smart dialogue, and sometimes we enjoy the takeaway that we give each other. And I think from a sensible, practical aspect, that's what we're seeing in this country right now. Listen, I believe in balance. You know, when the pendulum is at one side, it has to swing to the other. And so we can't keep going from one extreme to the other. We've got to learn to meet in the middle, because that's where the magic is. And seeing that folks who may have betted on Donald Trump because I'm a business owner, or I was a single issue topic, you know, finances are my thing, so I'm going to take a chance on Trump just because I might get a tax break. Well, a lot of those people who got tax breaks with Donald Trump are now bankrupt because of his mismanagement of the corona. And so we have to make sure that we're engaging people who are coming back to sensibility, because we need good common sense to run this nation. And that's what we got to get out of here, is what we currently have.
Yeah, I hear you, John, but the progressives would push back on you and say, that's BS.
The progressives didn't show up and
we
make
don't
Bernie
need
Sanders
Tara and the likes of
candidate.
Tara coming into the Democratic Party. So Tara, got to ask you, are you voting for Biden?
Oh, 100%. I've been very vocal about my support for Joe Biden since 2016, actually, 2015, when the discussion was, will he jump in the race and compete with Hillary? But unfortunately, at the time, his son had passed away, and he just could not muster up the strength to run at that point, which was completely understandable. And also the forces, that felt as though Hillary was owed after what happened with Barack Obama in 2008. So, but I'd written op-eds for CNN back then saying that Joe Biden is everything Hillary Clinton is not, and that he could have beaten Trump in 2016. I firmly believe. So that doesn't make me a Democrat, though. And I'm not, but I'm glad to be
embracing some of the Democratic Biden's been rolling out this Build Back Better campaign, what he's going to do around economics and education and investment in African American communities. Are you buying into, I know you're not a Democrat by name, but are you supportive of the Democratic platform? A lot of which we heard laid out by President Obama too at John Lewis's, that beautiful service that he had yesterday.
I have significant differences policy-wise on the Democratic platform. Where we are aligned is on the issue of healing this nation after the cancer of Donald Trump and Trumpism. And it's a character issue for me. It's a decency issue. It's a competence issue. And Joe Biden is a good and decent man. He's competent, he's experienced, and I don't have to worry about waking up every day to some kind of insane tweet that could lead us into World War III, or that's insulting an entire group of people, or threatening our constitutional republic. That I don't have to worry about that with Joe Biden. I actually am looking forward to the day where John and I and others on the other side of the aisle, we can get back to arguing over the policy prescriptions on how to fix things. I mean, I'm sure there are some things in Joe Biden's platform that I could get on board with, but at this point, those things are secondary to getting out someone who is an existential threat to the constitutional order of this country, and that's Donald Trump. At this point, nothing else matters. And to my progressive friends that want to put us through, the people who are supporting Biden through a purity test at this point, please do not cut your nose and spite your face here, because we can argue. You're never going to get any of your progressive policies even considered if Donald Trump is president for another 4 years. So hold your nose. Let's fight the revolution after November 3rd. Then you can go back to that. But it's a moot point of Donald Trump if you're working against your own interests and allowing Donald Trump to become president again.
Yeah, we know Democrats, sometimes we can figure out a way to lose an election, but hopefully everyone is listening to that good advice, Tara, that we're going to those that disagree with all these policy positions are going to just hold their nose and go into that voting, those voting booths and vote for Biden. I don't think it's the Johns and Arivas of the world that we're worried about. I think it's those suburban women outside, some of those big urban cities that last time we were depending on to, get us across the finish line who actually disappointed us. So we'll see what happens with them. But I want to talk about the Emmys now. Big nominations announced this week, and rather than Oscar so white, we can maybe say Emmy so black, because when you think about 100 acting nominations in the series of, limited series, television, movie categories, more than a third of those nominations went to Black actors, setting a new record. But not everyone was celebrating. You guys know the actress Dasha Polanco, known for a role as Daya on the Netflix Orange is the New Black, found herself in hot water because of this tweet. I think we have the tweet. And some people were offended, saying that, Latinx people need to just kind of fall back. So what do you guys think of all this backlash back and forth about Black folks being nominated in record numbers for the Emmys? What about you, Tara? What do you think of this back and forth we're having with this Latinx woman? It's not like, she's not Afro-Latina.
I mean, you're never going to make everybody happy. I just think that it's a bit self-absorbed considering the moment that we're in this country. We should be celebrating that there was diversity in the Emmy nominations, unlike anything we've ever seen. It's clear that the academies are recognizing the moment that we're in and recognizing the talent that is out there. And because a lot more people are home, a lot more streaming opportunities and content is out there now, so that there is more platforms for these talented actors and voices and writers and directors and producers to be a part of the entertainment community in ways that they hadn't been before. And I just think that it's unfortunate that you would take away from, someone like that would take away from the moment that we're in right now, complaining about, this group wasn't represented enough. And it's like, you had an acting job on a really, really popular series, and things happen in moderation, and there's been movement, and there has been more representation all across, especially with the trans community as well in general. So I just think that it's unfortunate. I mean, I'm happy to see the nominations that are out there, and even independent of just the more diverse nominations. I'm a huge Schitt's Creek fan. I'm absolutely in love with Dan Levy and that whole cast, and I'm thrilled to see that they've all been nominated and the show's been nominated, and I wish them the best.
Well, my favorite is all the nominations that Regina King got. I just love her and so excited about her nominations. But I gotta ask you, John, should Black Lives Matter? Should we be doing more to support, Latinx communities, and should we be speaking out more for these Latinx performers?
Well, listen, Ariva, I was really excited that the Emmy nominations look like the NAACP Image Awards. Like that's always a good time for me. And I would have liked to have seen Anjanou Ellis be recognized for her amazing work as Dr. Maddie Moss Clark in the Clark Sisters movie on Lifetime. Lifetime dropped the ball on getting her an Emmy nomination. But beyond that, I will say that for 401 years, Black people have been fighting to overcome. We've been through slavery. We've been through the Jim Crow South. Everyone knows our journey. And we're just at a moment now, 401 years later, where we really are starting to see the momentum of our overcoming. And so while we appreciate everybody, because we stand with everybody, we fought with the Latinx community with immigration issues. We've fought with women with Me Too. We fought with Lottie, Dottie, and everybody. And so everybody else has to rise up and match our level of fight. But while you're rising up to fight for yourself, what you can't do is tear us down. And the reason that people were upset with Dasha and with John Leguizamo, who both tweeted about this thing, was it wasn't because they congratulated us for finally having a year of achievement with the Emmys. It was almost like they took a dig at us and said, when are we going to get ours? It's not an either or. Celebrate our achievement. Celebrate the fight that we're seeing the product of. And then also say, I'll be grateful for the day when we can get ours. And it's time for us to fight. Listen, African Americans have been in the streets in certain cities in this country for weeks and months now. There is something happening in our nation right now where people feel differently about this. They feel differently about fighting for change and true change. And so, this is our moment. And so don't, again, just like we don't want women showing up naked with their legs spread in the street being a distraction, we also don't want our fellow marginalized groups being a distraction, because what you do is you create infighting, and we're not here for that. So yeah, we want the Latinx community to be celebrated for their work. One Day at a Time should have been nominated for an Emmy. People love that show, but the reality is that they've got to fight like we fought. So put in the time that we've put in, and then you can have something to fight about.
Let's listen to what Dasha did when she recorded, a video trying to explain what she meant in her tweet. Let's take a listen to that video recording.
Next snubbed in the Emmys. It was not shading our Black community. Blackness is in my DNA as a Dominican, as an Afro-Latina, as a whole. Okay? What I'm referring to is we cannot sit here and say we are snubbed and write these articles and all these kind of things when we ourselves are not doing our due diligence to create the work, to create the opportunities. We can't claim, oh, let's claim diversity, but when you're good, then everything else is okay. And diversity doesn't have to be about race. It has to be about pay. It has to be about positions. It has to be about equality. Equality means equality across the board. It has to be transgendered, LGBTQ, and so on. Thank you.
Yeah, I think she was, trying to walk it back and broaden the conversation to talk about other areas when, we think about equality and diversity. So what did you make of the video? You think it was enough? Or you like, girl, bye?
Jawn, that's all you.
I'm cracking up laughing over here because, listen, she was trying to walk it back, and then she lost her way at the end with the abrupt, thank you. It just, she meant well, but sometimes you step in it. Again, this isn't an either or. Celebrate those who are making achievement and do the work to accomplish your own. The Oscars So White thing, it happened 5, 6, 7 years ago, and yet and still, there still is a lack of diversity. There was a few years of progress, but then the Academy last year, 2019, still was embarrassed again based on the diversity and the nominations and things of that magnitude. So we keep fighting, Latinx community, but don't step on us and our moment while you're trying to have yours. We should work together.
And we are all in this together. And I think that's a good message, John. Don't come for us because we have been there for you.
We ain't sent for you.
We're there for everybody. We fight the fight for everybody.
Everybody.
Our last topic is Ellen. Ellen is in the news this morning. She issued a letter apologizing for what has been, this big uproar about how she treats her staff and about how her staff treats other staff. We know Kevin Porter, actually, let's go back to that tweet. He basically tweeted saying that, she was one of the meanest persons on the planet. And he then encouraged people to share their mean stories with him. And there was like 2,000 responses to his request to share the mean stories. And when this story first started coming out, it was really about Ellen. Now it's shifted to sexual harassment and racism in the workplace, but it's really pointing now to those executive producers. And I'm just wondering, is there some effort, being made by this production company to move the conversation away from Ellen and to focus on, her executive producers? Are they being thrown under the bus? What are you guys thinking about this story?
I'll jump in here,
Tara.
Yeah, Jawn, I'll react to you because this is more your lane. But go ahead.
I got you. So I read the articles, Ariva, and those executive producers, particularly one that the trades are saying will probably be asked to leave the show. They really did appear problematic. There was a culture that the producers had that Ellen may not have been privy to. I will say this though. I know that there is a segment of people in Hollywood that say they've not had pleasant experiences with Ellen. I know lots of people who worked on her show. 2 of my close friends were regulars on the show, and she couldn't have been anything more but kind and gracious to either one of them. In addition, I was at a Usher Grammy party one year and actually danced with Ellen and Portia, and she was so warm and so engaging. And typically when people are like as nasty as she's been described, that, you know, they can be that way in every facet of life. They're not nice in any capacity. But what I will say is this: most celebrities, most hosts, a lot of the talent in this business, the persona that you see on TV may not be in line with who they really are. We've all had exchanges with people who, you know, you thought they were going to be nice and they were a complete horror show when you met them in real life. And I don't know if that's the case with Ellen, but I do know that where there's smoke, there could be fire. And so there is a culture and a climate on her show that her, with her name on the marquee, she's going to have to take accountability for. She's going to have to restructure. And if she's going to continue this show and continue to say, be kind to one another at the end of the show, she's got to make sure that the environment there at the Ellen show is kind to the people who work there and make her shine day to day.
And I think you're right about that, John. But one of the things that's kind of bugging me about this, Tyra, and I'll ask you as a woman, and we saw this happen with Refinery 29, where the editor of Refinery 29 had to step down because of allegations of it being a toxic workforce, and a lot of it had to do with sexism. And a lot of these allegations against this work environment, again, have to do with sexual harassment and the treatment or the unfair treatment of women. And Ellen says, I've not been able to stay on top of things. I relied on other people to do their jobs. But as a female head, whether you're the talent or you're the executive producer or you're the editor of a media company, Tyra, what responsibility do you think we have, particularly as women, to make sure that our workforces, our workplaces are not toxic, particularly around sexual harassment issues? I think that's what's been really bothering me about this story.
Yeah, I think to John's point that her name is on the marquee. Her name is with the show, and the buck stops there. When you are you're the namesake of the show, you can never allow yourself to become so disconnected from the people who make you who you are and make the trains run on time with your program, that something like this kind of toxic environment festers. So you can only hide behind I trusted people to do this for me and I wasn't aware. You can only hide behind that for so long. Ultimately, it's your job to make sure that the environment is not a toxic one on your own show. So I hope for Ellen's sake that that this is a teachable moment for her and an example to other people that when you get to that position, that you don't lose sight of the people who helped you get there, and you make sure that you take the time out from your schedule to pay attention to what's going on behind the scenes. Because ultimately, if you don't have a happy workforce, if you do have a toxic environment going on, it's going to come back to bite you. You are not that insulated from it. And no one wants to hear about lower level people weren't doing their job when your name is attached to what's going on. So I hope for everyone's sake that it's a teachable moment and they learn their lesson.
But John, are women, in this case, Ellen, and again, that editor of Refinery 29, are we being held to a different standard? Or, are we seeing the same kind of forensic investigation of workplaces, that, men are in charge of? Might this be a double standard?
No, because, listen, we went through almost 3.5, 4 years of the Me Too movement, where men behaving badly in all factions of business and culture and society were brought down for inappropriate behavior from one extreme to the other. I mean, there wasn't much of a scale there. I mean, it was like if you had a bad date with a colleague, you may have lost your job in the Me Too movement. And I think now people have kind of retooled and said, okay, wait a minute, we can't treat all of these things the same. So men had a really bad 4 years. And let me tell you, I was on the front lines of a lot of that. I got a lot of pushback, particularly from people of color, when I took folks like R. Kelly and Bill Cosby, who were at the further extreme of the Me Too movement, to task before African Americans had really embraced what these guys had actually done. So I think it's, the playing field is open. It's not just a male or a female or gender thing now. If you have a bad culture on your job, you got to go. We know that ABC News just had a situation where they got rid of one of their top executives, Barbara Fadita, who was also the head of diversity as a white woman, but apparently was using all types of racial tropes and saying that Robin Roberts should be glad she wasn't picking cotton and things of that nature. She called Sunny Hostin of The View low rent. So, when you're in a top seat like that, and you're disrespecting people, listen, it's not race, it's not gender, it's inappropriateness, and unemployment will be your path.
Well, I agree with most of what you said, except yes, let's not lose sight. Women still suffer from a tremendous amount of gender bias and implicit bias in the workplace. And if you are a Black woman in particular, you have the double whammy of being Black and a female. And those workplaces can still be toxic in ways that are very different if you are a white male and you are, still held to a different
And I
standard.
agree with that. Please note that I'm not saying that. And
I
listen,
wanted to put that on the record, okay?
and listen, and I believe in pay women what they're worth. Like, I listen, as a Black man, I'm not getting paid what I'm worth. So listen, I'm for equal play,
Equal pay for everybody.
equality for everybody. We shall all overcome.
But I want to ask you before I let you guys go, Tara, you work with some powerful men in this Lincoln project. George Clooney, has his face attached to this project. So
Conway.
I'm sorry.
That'd be great if it was George Clooney, but it's George Conway.
George Conway, I'm sorry. Thank you. Correction. It would be great if it was George Clooney. It was George George Conway.
George Conway wishes he was George Clooney too, Ariva.
Maybe we can recruit George Clooney. Maybe this is an ad to get George Clooney on the project.
Yeah, we welcome him. Come on board, George. We'd love to have another one.
Prominent attorney, one of my colleagues. So what is it like working with George Conway on this project?
Yeah, listen, all the guys on the team at Lincoln Project, and the men and women behind the Lincoln Project efforts are a bunch of dedicated, very committed fellow pirates. We call each other. This pirate ship that we're on to take on this effort to get Donald Trump out of office and to purge this country of Trumpism has really been an exciting honor and a privilege. And, what we're doing and the ads that we're running and the frequency in which we're running them, the amount of the enthusiasm that people have shown for our efforts has really, really been encouraging. And for people who want to support Lincoln Project, you can go to lincolnproject.us and sign up and pay attention to what we're doing and amplify the ads and donate if you want. We just had a huge town hall. We do national town halls. The last one, we had 90,000 people involved. We debuted a new collaborative piece we did with Hollywood director, Jawn of National Treasure fame. He also did The Meg. He's done While You Were Sleeping, a lot of popular movies. We did a collaborative effort with him called Wake Up, which is an excellent video. It's 6 minutes long. It's really, really good. We just released another one ad this morning going after Donald Trump's attacks on the election integrity. It's called We Will Vote, which is, something that we cannot emphasize enough. To do not fall for the okie doke from this Trump administration about voting and mail-in voting. I happen to work on, I consulted on the Flag of Treason ad that we put out back in June, which was at a time before the whole Confederate symbols and Confederate flag issue really became what it became. It was prescient, and we were told that it was instrumental in moving the military to ban the Confederate flag from military bases, also instrumental in NASCAR's decision to ban the Confederate flag at NASCAR races as well. So we are really having an impact. So I'm thrilled to be a part of it, and politics has been a good old boys club for a long time, and I enjoy being a rabble rouser in that environment, because at least we're on the right side.
Love to see you involved in that project, and our producer said you said this new ad is a scorcher. So I want everyone gets out and make sure that they go to your website and check out that ad. But before I let you go, John, last point, we can't have this conversation today, and Tara brought up the issue of voting rights. And yesterday we saw, iconic civil rights leader John Lewis laid to rest in one of the most beautiful, memorial homegoing ceremonies, I think, of all times. 3 living presidents, Speaker of the House, a song written, with his own words by the Winans, performed by BB and Marvin Winans. Just a beautiful homegoing ceremony. Any, last words about our beloved John Lewis?
Listen, yesterday was an amazing day. That service was tailor-made by him, for him, and was remarkable. I think the thing that struck me the most yesterday, though, was that he wrote that op-ed for the New York Times where he asked to redeem the soul of America. Even in his transition to heaven, he decided to leave us a blueprint for how we can move this thing forward. If that's not exceptional leadership, I don't know what is. So I'm so grateful for the work and the sacrifice of John Lewis. And I really hope if I don't care if you've never voted in your life, if you don't vote for any other reason than to honor John Lewis alone, then you're doing a disservice. And one more thing I will say, I remember in 2016, Colin Kaepernick, who I've been a very vocal supporter of, came out and said that he was not going to vote in that election. And, that means all the people who support him and follow him and the sports fans that ride with him, they probably also didn't vote in that election at his urging. And so I think this time around, Colin Kaepernick needs to come out and encourage people to vote, because him not voting also allowed a man to be elected that was able to help put him out of the NFL. He could was a contributor to his own demise by withholding his vote. And so voting matters. And if you don't show up and vote, you might put yourself out of whatever industry you're in by not being a participant in the process.
Yeah,
Donald Trump won by 77,000 votes, which is less people than a full football stadium for a Colin Kaepernick San Francisco 49ers football game. Keep that in perspective for people who think about not voting this time around.
You brought that home,
Tara. Mine likes to say, if you don't vote on Tuesday, don't complain on Wednesday. We got to leave it there, guys. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure to catch up with you.
Good time.
You guys keep up the good work, Tara. You keep killing them with those ads. We love having these moderate Republicans standing up for Democratic candidates.
Thank you.
John, if
she's getting more and more purple, Ariva. She's getting more and more purple.
Oh. You can see the glow around her head, the purple glow.
We're sane Republicans getting into good trouble. The Honorable
good
John
trouble.
Lewis.
Great way to end the segment. Thank you guys so much.
All right.
Safe out there.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right. So much going on in the news. Always glad to catch up with friends who have their fingers on the pulse of the news, because it's hard to keep up with everything that's happening. Before I get out, I want to talk about some shocking new developments in the Ghislaine Maxwell sexual assault case against minors. You will recall Maxwell was the confidant of Jeffrey Epstein, who committed suicide in a New York jail after being arrested and charged for having sex with minors. Trump was recently asked about a question about Maxwell. I want you to listen to what he had to say about Maxwell.
Ghislaine Maxwell is in prison, and a lot of if she's going to turn powerful people. And I know you've talked in the past about Prince Andrew, and you've criticized Bill Clinton's behavior. I'm wondering, do you feel that she's going to turn in powerful men? How do you see that working out?
I don't know. I haven't really been following it too much. I just wish her well, frankly. I've met her numerous times over the years, especially since I lived in Palm Beach, and I guess they lived in Palm Beach. But I wish her well, whatever.
What's remarkable about that? That's the president of the United States saying he wishes her well, not once, but twice. This is a lady who was recently arrested and charged with facilitating and soliciting minors for Jeffrey Epstein, who had, accusations that he had sexual relations, sexually assaulting these minors, some as young as 14. And the allegations against Maxwell is that not only did she solicit and assist with this criminal enterprise, but that she too actually sexually assaulted minors as young as 14. And we have the president of the United States wishing her well. Well, just recently, a treasure trove of documents were released in this case, implicating high-profile men, including Prince Andrew and the former New Mexico governor, Bill Richardson. Now, Maxwell's team has fought extremely hard to keep these records from becoming public. You will recall that she was recently denied bail, and she remains in a New York jail cell as she awaits further hearings. Her trial is set for July 2021, and if convicted of all of these charges, the charges that have been brought against her with relationship to soliciting minors, helping Jeffrey Epstein have access to minors, and then actually sexually assaulting these minors. If she is convicted of these charges, she faces up to 35 years in prison. We'll be keeping up with that story because it's just such a shocking story. These victims deserve justice. And one of the reasons that the judge denied bail to Maxwell is because she had ties outside of the United States. She had bank accounts outside of the United States. When the federal agents apprehended her in her house, she apparently tried to run into another room. She tried to hide a cell phone that was a part of the investigation. And quite frankly, the judge determined that she was a flight risk. And the judge was concerned that the victims that have waited for years for justice in this case would be denied an opportunity to have that justice if he granted bail to Maxwell, not sure that she would return, that she would show up for court, that she would make herself available for trial. So the judge, in denying her attorney's request that she be let out on bail, sent a strong message. And I think that message was to victims of sexual assault, that you do matter. And that a coward like Jeffrey Epstein, who took his life, is not going to deprive these victims, who now are women, but who were little girls when they were sexually assaulted by Epstein, and allegations that Maxwell engaged in that kind of conduct, that these women will finally get their day in court. All right, y'all, I'm out. Thank you so much to my production team. Thank you for the sponsor, Special News Network. Thank you for joining me this morning for Hot Topics. You can continue to follow me for the conversation at Areva Martin. And remember, be safe out there. Don't forget to wear your mask. And we are all in this together.